Man goes out for a ride, meets a woman, kisses her, dies. His ex-girlfriend sees his corpse, kisses it, and dies. And then 6 other women die. We've hit peak folk song here, and I'm here to tell you all about it. George Collins walked out one May morning, when May was all in bloom. There he espied a fair pretty maid, washing her marble stone. Welcome to Handed Down, where we celebrate traditional songs and the people who sing them. I'm Jenny Shaw, and this is another song from my childhood, thanks to the Topic Folk Sampler number 6, where this is the first song on the album. I cannot overstate just how much I loved this song as a child. Shirley Collins' cool vocals with Dolly Collins' haunting accompaniment was just an intoxicating combination for this strange and tragic ballad, although I could never really work out the story. Shirley Collins herself said, "The effectiveness of the ballad comes partly from the matter-of-fact manner in which the characters accept their fate, and the way the death of 6 girls hints at George Collins's great attractiveness." My dad, commenting sometime in the late 70s, was a bit more pithy than this. He said, "He must have been one hell of a guy." But why? Why did 6 pretty maids die all in one night? For George Collins's sake? Was it because of a broken heart? Or something else? And why did George Collins, clearly a vigorous young man, sicken and die for no apparent reason? George Collins rode home to his father's own gate, and loudly did he ring. "Come, rise, my dear father, and let me in. Rise, mother, and make my bed." As is usually the case in folk song, it's because the song has been handed down across the generations, and in this case across different countries and different languages, and along the way some of the details have been lost or changed. So again, we're left with a mysterious story with gaps in its logic, very much like Flandyke Shaw, whose story we told in our very first episode. The song we're left with today goes a bit like this. George Collins rides out and meets a pretty maid washing her white marble stone. Not quite sure why. She calls to him very persistently and says his life won't last him long. But still not sure what's going on. George seems to be near a stream of some kind. He goes and he kisses the girl, as you do, and then he rides home. And when he gets there, he makes a bit of a fuss. He tells his family he's about to die for no apparent reason. And if he does die, he wants to be buried by the marble stone, presumably the same one where he met the girl. But we learn that this stone is by Lady Eleanor's door, a brand new character. We don't know who she is. But never fear, because we then see her in a fine room. She's a wealthy woman, and she sees a fair corpse passing by her house. She wants to know who it is, and her serving girl says it's her former lover, George Collins. Now, why Eleanor didn't recognise him, we don't know, especially as we later hear that he's kissed her 10,000 times, so she must have had her eyes closed at the time. But we can guess why the serving girl knows him. In fact, George seems to have been quite the ladies' man, and we'll hear more about that in a moment. Eleanor rather foolishly goes to kiss George's corpse and immediately realises that she will be dead by tomorrow as well. And she's not the only one, because apparently 6 women die in connection with George Collins, and I have not the faintest idea why. It's all very perplexing. And I will confess that although I've known this song since childhood, it's only while researching this episode that I had any idea of what was happening here. I had a vague idea that George Collins was spreading some kind of disease all over the place. And what I didn't know was that his first encounter by the stream was not with a mortal woman at all, and that rather than being ill, he and the 6 women and Lady Eleanor were killed by some kind of curse or poison carried by a kiss, like a Cold War spy drama. I really like a quote from Hetty West and Bert Lloyd. In the sleeve notes for Hetty's version, they say, "Literally poisonous girls are a strong feature of folklore." And that's now one of my favourite sentences. And this song is really, really popular in the United States. We'll come back to that later. But the roots of this ballad can be found across Europe. One of the oldest songs in the Breton language from northern France is the Ballad of Lord Nan. It was collected in the 1830s from the oral tradition, and it's thought to be from the medieval era. The ballad tells the story of the young Lord Nan, whose wife has just given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. He's so happy to have a son that he asks his wife what her heart desires as a gift. All she wants is flesh of roebuck. In other words, she's got a craving for venison. Lord Nan is a brave lad, but he doesn't know his folklore, so he just grabs his lance and he leaps on his horse and he rides into the forest. Straight away, he spots a white doe, just exactly what he wanted and not at all suspicious. He hunts her all through the day until he and his horse are really, really sweaty. A nice little detail there. Until at last he comes upon a fountain surrounded by a fine lawn, and there's a Corrigan, a fairy sorceress combing her long blonde hair with a golden comb. The Corrigan gets right down to business, and Lord Nan has 3 choices: marry the Corrigan, lie sick on his bed for 7 years, or die in 3 days' time. Now, we've already seen that the young Lord Nan is not the brightest button in the box, and this is how he figures it out. He can't marry her because he's already married. He doesn't want to lie in bed for 7 years, and he won't die in 3 days because only God can know when he's going to die. He also mentions that he'd rather die than marry a Corrigan, so goodbye, Lord Nan. And then the scene switches. He's asking his mother to make his bed and pleading with her not to tell his wife about his impending death. The rest of the song is all about his mother trying and failing to conceal his death from his wife, because, of course, his wife works it out, perhaps picking up on a few tiny clues, like her husband is missing, someone is being buried, and her mother-in-law can't stop crying. At this point, Lady Nan throws herself into his grave and dies, with no thought for their 2 babies, apparently. But in good folklore fashion, 2 oak trees grow from the grave, and in their branches 2 white doves who flew away together. So that's okay. Another version of this story, also medieval, can be found across Scandinavia. You can find it in Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, and the Faroe Islands. So Olaf is on the way to his wedding. Riding through the woods, he comes upon a dance, a fairy dance. The Elf King's daughter reaches out to him, asking him to join in the dance. And here we find out that Sir Olaf is considerably smarter than Lord Nan, because he refuses her advances and tells her it's his wedding day. The Elf King's daughter isn't having any of that, and she tries to bribe him instead. She opens up the bidding with a pair of boots and then throws in a fine shirt and eventually cold hard cash. Well, gold, medieval cash. But Unlike George Collins, he resists her advances, not that it does him much good, because at the end of the ballad, he dies anyway, along with his betrothed and his mum. While I was reading through this ballad, I suddenly realised that I'd known it all along. Steel Ice Band's song, Dance With Me, on their All Around My Hat album, is a version of this ballad, so I guess Sir Olaf has also been handed down to me by my folk rock loving dad. There's also a Scottish version. Clark Colville is walking with his wife, a lusty dame apparently, and she warns him not to go by the wells of Slane. Did I ne'er see a fair woman, but I would sin with her fair body, he replies. And at this point, I think he deserves all he gets. But it turns out that he is actually all talk. He doesn't so much as kiss the woman. He meets her by the stream, where she's washing a silken sark, or a petticoat, on the marble stone, which makes a lot more sense than washing the stone itself. She curses him and reveals herself to be a mermaid, and Clark Colville goes home to die. What I noticed about all of these is that, unlike George Collins, there's no hints of a moral message. With George, you could take away some good advice. Don't go kissing watery tarts, to misquote Monty Python. Sorry about that, couldn't resist. But whereas with the other stories, it's more like if you meet a fairy princess, you are doomed. So far, we've focused on the first part of the ballad, but the second part is just as weird in its own way. It's found in the song Lady Alice, which is almost certainly a fragment of the whole George Collins story. Though, where he's mentioned, the hero is called Giles Collins. The song starts either with the lady sitting in her window and seeing the corpse coming, or in some versions, Giles Collins telling his mother that he is about to die. Both Giles Collins and Lady Alice end up dead at opposite ends of the graveyard, but after their deaths, a rose grows from Giles Collins's grave and reaches out to Lady Alice. And this is an old folklore motif going back at least a couple of thousand years, which we looked at in the Barbara Allen episode. But apart from that, the supernatural sections, the whole business with the water sprite, are missing. This version crossed the Atlantic and is found in America from the early 19th century. And there's nothing supernatural about this version, and in some American variants, it's taken on some verses from another song, The Dying Hobo, making our hero a down-and-out rather than a lord. And here is how the first two verses sound in a recording that's almost 100 years old, sung by Kelly Horrell and recorded by Victor Records.
Was at the western water tank one cold December day, and in an empty boxcar a dying hobo lay. You see his girl in yonder's hall, a-sewing her silk so fine. But when she heard poor George was dead, she laid her silks aside.
You can hear in the second verse that the girl is in her hall and she's sewing silk when she hears of George's death. And later she does go to kiss him in his coffin. He's just known as George in this version, but others give him his full name. But the full version can also be found in the Americas too, where it's often known as Young Collins. And there's a really lovely version recorded by Peggy Seeger back in the 1960s. You can find it on YouTube and I would highly recommend it. Now, at this point in the show, I would usually talk about the relevance of this song to society, either today or back when the song was most popular. But this one's a bit of a conundrum. I'm not aware of any time in our past where fairy attacks were a major hazard, but, well, for most of history, we didn't understand germ theory. We didn't know why healthy young people sickened and died for no apparent reason. And so we developed stories to make sense of our experiences. Some might say we're going back to those days, but that would belong to a different type of podcast altogether. So I'm going to stick to folk music now. And I'll say this, young men who like to go around and sin with a woman's fair body, to quote Clark Coville, are apt to pick up nasty diseases and pass them on to others. And that would certainly solve one of the remaining mysteries about this song, why 6 pretty maids died all in one night. Maidens they were not, and it was all for George Collins's sake.
George Collins rode out on a May morning when May was all in blue, and there he espied a pretty fair maid washing her white marble stone. She called, she hollered, she hired her voice, she waved her lily white hand. Come hither to me, George Collins, she cried, for your life it won't last you long. He put his foot on the broad water side, over the leaves sprang he. He embraced her by the middle so small, and he kissed her red rosy lips. George Collins rode home to his father's door. He pulled on the bell and it rang. Oh, rise up, mother, and make my bed. Rise, sister, and let me in. For if I should die this night, as I suppose I shall, go bury me by the marble stone that's by Lady Eleanor's home. Lady Eleanor sat in her castle door, weaving a silken skein. She saw the fairest corpse a-coming that ever the sun shone on. She said unto her serving maid, whose corpse is this so fine? The girl replied, it's George Collins's corpse, an old and true lover of thine. Come, set him down, my 6 pretty maids. Throw open that coffin so fine, that I may kiss his clay cold lips. 10,000 times they have met mine. And you go upstairs and you stretch me the sheet that's wove of the silk so fine, and hang it all over George Collins's corpse. Tomorrow it'll hang over mine. The news was carried to London town and hung upon London's gates, that 6 pretty maids died all in one night, and it's all for George Collins' sake.